Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sport Network. We have a great show for you today. We will be covering the Champions League final preview between Real Madrid and Dortmund. We'll discuss into the future of next year's Champions League and discuss which Premier League team has the best chance to win next year's Champions League. We'll talk about whether or not the Champions League final will be enough for Vinicius to win Ballon d'Or. We'll discuss Gareth Southgate and if there's any way he stays on post-Euro 2024. And make sure you stick around for later in the show. I'll be giving you my thoughts on some of the top headlines going on in the football world. We have to start off with the game of, the club football, pinnacle game of club football that will be taking place between Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund. It's a team that's had two different journeys throughout the season, especially within domestic form. You have Real Madrid, at the top, winning the La Liga, getting comfortably, through the group stages in the Champions League with 6 wins. Just a perfect season for them in general. Had a little bit of times where they had to struggle against City and a little bit against Leipzig at the end. But apart that, it's been smooth for them in this Champions League. And Dortmund, it's been very different. Number one, the season has been, not good by their standards. Finishing 5th in Bundesliga. Only qualifying for next year's Champions League because of this new format, which allows this new added 5th place team in there. So, they have not been on the best form this season. Some of the players that they've had stepped up in the Champions League, especially in the knockout stages, that haven't really performed all season. Defensively, Hummels, Schlotterbeck, they were very, very key in the way that they defended against PSG. But throughout this season, it's been really rough for them defensively because, Schlotterbeck, he could be a little bit of a deer in the headlights. Matt Hummels doesn't really have the pace, especially nowadays, to play at that level consistently. And then fullbacks wise, it's been very up and down throughout the season. You bring in Maatsen on loan in that fullback position, that left-sided fullback position. A guy who wasn't playing at all for Chelsea, you bring him Borussia Dortmund and he automatically gets put in the starting lineup. You also have Ryerson on the other side. Decent players, but players that could get caught out. And I don't want to get too much on the negatives of Borussia Dortmund. The season has not been the best by them, but they have reached the Champions League final by winning the group of death. In my opinion, that was the toughest group. When you see PSG, Newcastle, AC Milan, that's a tough group. And, there was times where they were really getting dominated by Atletico Madrid. The fact that they were able to move on, still astounds me to this day, but they were able to get it done. And against Borussia Dortmund, against PSG, as I said previously, they defended for their lives. They were very mature and they looked very experienced in the way that they defended. They took advantage of the opportunities that they came with Füllkrug and Hummels. In that first leg, they had a lot of opportunities. They played really, really well. One end-to-end was PSG. But in that second leg, just be defensive, be clinical, and they were able to get a breakthrough early in that second half that kind of eased the pressure off and allowed them to play with more of a lower block. And whenever Matt Hummels and Schlotterbeck is not getting stretched, where they play where the Borussia Dortmund are able to play condense and the fullbacks don't go attack as much, it plays to the strengths of Borussia Dortmund's defenders because of the fact that Hummels is not the most pace, and in transition, him and Schlotterbeck can get taken apart. But with the low block being able to be played, not many spaces, not many gaps, it really put Borussia Dortmund in a comfortable position to move on, and they were able to move on there. So getting back to the main point, two teams that are really coming from different positions when it comes to form. Two teams that have one game to win a Champions League. So they'll both, love to be in this position if you asked them this at the beginning of the season. Now, as far as my keys to the game, I go through this scenario so many times in my head, and it's really a massive struggle for me to see any sort of way Real Madrid are not the champions, are not lifting up the trophy after the game. I'm just looking through scenarios in my head because, look, let's say Real Madrid can score early. Let's say Real Madrid were able to score early against Borussia Dortmund. Well, then these Dortmund players, they're gonna have to push up forward. Ryerson and Madsen are gonna push up even higher, even more higher than they're used to. Even though they're both generally more attacking fullbacks, they're gonna start pushing up, and then you're gonna have Vinicius and Rodrigo going up against Hummels and Schlotterbeck. I just think that's a recipe for murder, and I could see that going horribly, horribly wrong very, very quickly. And that's if Real Madrid score early. And then if Borussia Dortmund, are able to score early, and the Real Madrid start playing more of the, progression football, I just feel like they'll suffocate Dortmund, and, Real Madrid is going to take that one breakthrough, maybe one mistake, and, Real Madrid will be right back in it. And you see with Real Madrid, they're good at, taking advantage of mistakes, smelling blood, even when they're down, not being out. The experience in that team and just the culture of them, they've been brilliant in these sort of comebacks. That's just what they are. So I'm trying to see this from any sort of perspective where I can see Borussia Dortmund pull an upset, and I don't see it happening. I think when it comes to this game, for Borussia Dortmund, if you have to look at their keys, number one, Emre Can, who is not really the most athletic player out there, still him being in that position right in front of the center backs, that traditional number 6, he has to be key in number one, playing out with the pressure, getting the ball off the back line, easing the pressure, because Real Madrid will not be afraid to press high in certain moments. And he'll be key in protecting Hummels and Schlotterbeck and sensing danger of Rodrigo and Vinicius making those runs, covering any sort of space that could be in danger. He's going to be very, very important. If Borussia Dortmund are going to win this game, Emre Can has to be key for them, and also Nicholas Füllkrug. And two things that he needs to succeed in if they want to win. Number one, in that PSG game, he was able to score a goal in that first leg, but there was multiple opportunities that he missed that, he could have easily slotted into back into the net. He has to be consistent with all his opportunities. He might not get much, and every opportunity he gets, he has to be clinical. Number one, he has to be clinical. Number two, if Borussia Dortmund want to retain any sort of possession and actually, go end to end, his play to get his ability to get his back on the facing the goal, playing with his back to goal, that play has to be on the top notch. He has to be able to get the ball and for it to stick, and for him to allow guys to run in behind some of the pacier players that they got, like an Adeyemi, a Sancho, or Malin potentially. He needs to, be that engine for them with his back to goal play. He and in terms of not just receiving the ball but controlling it and being able to find them, his ability to be kind of an extra midfielder is going to be very, very important with how low Borussia Dortmund will get sucked in at times. He's going to be the main outlet a lot of situations, and his back to goal has to be impeccable if Borussia Dortmund want to win this game. Now, Real Madrid, it's a sense, for them to make sure there is no slip up, they got to make sure, everybody knows Real Madrid is favorites. But in some ways, they can't know that. I think what's made Real Madrid strong over the past couple of years is despite the fact that they're facing teams, that might be just better than them in general of the way that they play and stuff, or the players that they have. Real Madrid have used that underdog mentality to rise up above them and to get past them in these clutch moments. When you look at the Chelsea game 2 years ago, in that where they had the Rodrigo moment to push it to extra time, and then the Modric ball to Rodrigo. That the Man City game that year, scoring 2 goals at the end of at the last minute of the second leg to push that to extra time. In this season against Man City, I think being the underdog has kind of helped them in there, just in terms of mentality, But obviously, this team has so much experience and so much, and even if when they're playing in ties that they're better than, you don't see a slip up, you don't see a lack of concentration, a lack of focus because of the experience in this team with the Modric, a Kroos. They're not gonna allow that to happen. So I think Borussia Dortmund will really be up against it here. Now it's one game, and this time last week I was saying the same thing about Man City United, where I was saying I can't see any way United win it against City. Well, United were able to be clinical on a counter, and City just had a horrible day. And the problem that I just don't see this happening again is City having a horrible day. There's a difference in DNA between City and Real Madrid. I don't think Real Madrid, I don't think it's just possible for Real Madrid to have a horrible day in a Champions League final. Not the way that they're, just not with the culture and the footballing tradition at that club. So for me, I think it'll be very, very difficult for Borussia Dortmund to get back this. Now, I've been saving this for a while. I'm going to go with my prediction. My prediction will be Real Madrid, obviously, based on what I'm saying Real Madrid is going to win. That's just obvious. But I'll have to go with Real Madrid 3. No. Real Madrid. This is difficult. I don't know if I'm wanting to give them. I'm going to say Real Madrid 2, Borussia Dortmund 0. Real Madrid 2, Borussia Dortmund 0. 2-0 victory for Real Madrid. They'll lift up the Champions League. That is my prediction. We're going to take a short break here. When I come back, I'm going to discuss the next year's Champions League and some of the Premier League teams' chances to lift up that trophy next season.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Before the break, I discussed Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund's Champions League final. I now, think it's time to discuss next year's Champions League, which is a crazy thing to do, but I think it's an interesting topic. So besides Manchester City, which Premier League team has the best chance to win next year's Champions League? Now, obviously, just to remind you, there's going to be only 4 teams in the Premier League next season, the normal top 4, because, the coefficient thing didn't land the way the Premier League favor based on UEFA results. In that situation, didn't go the favor of the Premier League. I think the 5 slots went to Serie A and Bundesliga. So the Premier League's 4 teams will be Manchester City, who won the title, obviously, Arsenal by finishing 2nd, Liverpool by finishing 3rd, and Aston Villa under Unai Emery not getting back, because the last time, I don't even know when's the last time they've been in European, but they've never been in the Champions League. Whenever it's been called the Champions League, they've probably been in like the European version of it, the European Cup, but they've never been in the Champions League since it's been called that. So their first appearance, and it'll be interesting to see Champions League games at Villa Park. I think that's something that'll be fun to watch. But yeah, so really comes down to between Arsenal, Liverpool, and Villa, which team has the best chance to make a run in the Champions League. Now, Arsenal European form under Arteta has been very, very weak. You can't argue that. In terms of European performance under Arteta, it's been very weak. It's been kind of embarrassing in certain aspects of it. Even I was talking about earlier this year, Arsenal had like 4 games, 3 of which were like 5-0, 5-0, 6-0 wins. In between that, sandwiched by a 0-1 loss away to Porto. It just, that screenshot for me just shows, Arsenal within Europe, and it's been bad for them. Last year, being knocked out. This is a team, by the way, that went to the final couple of weeks in the title race. So this was a strong Arsenal team, getting knocked out. Not last year, but not this year, but last year, getting knocked out by Benfica. You go back to them getting knocked out by Olympiacos, getting knocked out by Villarreal in the semifinals. There just has been no sort of European success, even in the Europa League. And then this year, their first year back in the Champions League, getting knocked out by a Bayern team in the quarterfinals, which we have to be honest, this is the weakest Bayern team in the last decade and a half, maybe last 15 years, last 14 years. It was not a strong Bayern team. I believe it was a Bayern team that barely scrapped 70 points. They finished with 72 points this season and finished 3rd in the Bundesliga. And they weren't able to get past Bayern. And if you look at that game, in the first leg, you played well, you got up and down. It took a breakthrough to make it 2-2, but, you played well. In that second leg, it was meh, especially when they conceded. You would think, okay, Arsenal, being the team that they are, the attacking display of talent that they show week in, week out in the Premier League, they would at least, at least show some sort, at least test Bayern. But, the Bayern center halves in that last 30 minutes they could have smoked a cigar and drank a cup of wine if they wanted to while watching what was going on. It was, there was no sort of real threat to them at all. They had one, half Odegaard chance. But apart from that, Arsenal, they didn't really test them at all. So it just shows, the pedigree under them, the European pedigree they've had against Arteta. It's been weak. Liverpool, on the other hand, they've been very, in terms of Europe, they have a strong history in terms of Europe. Very strong history. They have 6 Champions League titles. That happens to be the most amongst Premier League teams. It's actually double the amount more than the next team, which is Manchester United. with winning 6 as recently as winning 1 a few years ago under Klopp. So the pedigree is there with them. And with Champions League compared to other sports or any other tournaments or anything like that, Champions League is the league that history and tradition and culture matters the most. It happens to play an advantage. I don't know if it gets into the psyche of the players of the opposing teams, but when you're playing for a club like a Liverpool or a Real Madrid and you're going up against a team that's had less pedigree, it just seems like you have the psychological edge straight off the bat. And yeah, and I think Liverpool has that. But now the tricky thing with Liverpool is this new manager coming in, this reboot of this team, of this very successful generation that they had under Jurgen Klopp. It's going to be totally different. And different good or different bad is, remains to be seen. But I still believe, just based on the pedigree and some of the players that they have on this team that's had success in the Champions League, the experience that they have with the Andy Robertson, the Trent Alexander-Arnold, the Virgil van Dijk, Mohamed Salah, Luis Diaz, who went to the final, Jota too, who went to a final. They have a lot of players that's been at least to the final. Those last 2 players weren't on the team that won it, but it just shows this team, they have a good sense of experience. They still have talent within the squad. Arne Slot, hopefully Liverpool, the new ownership group, can bring him in a few players here and there that can, help him play his way and, create a smooth adaptation for Liverpool. I think Liverpool definitely gives out of all the Premier League teams besides City, definitely has the best chance. I'd give them a better chance to win the Champions League compared to Arsenal. Now, Aston Villa, obviously, I have to say that's the weakest of the 3. Just based on the squad, and this is the first time that a lot of these players have ever played a Champions League game. And that, again, when I'm talking about history, culture, all that plays a factor. The lack of experience can make you pay. You saw Newcastle this season, playing your first year in the Champions League. It's a unique experience. Now, I'm not writing them off of anything. I think they definitely still have potential to get out of the group and maybe cause, some sort of upset, a shock in the round of 16 or something. But in terms of, winning it all, going into the Bernabeu and getting a result against Real Madrid, or going to Allianz Arena and beating Bayern and that sort of, I just think the experience within the team is not enough, and I don't think the squads are there to compete with those sort of teams. Even this year, they weren't European Conference League. They weren't even able to reach the final in the European Conference League. It's just, I think Europe is just a little bit too much for them. I think their squad will get tested playing in Europe, in Champions League games, as long with Premier League games. And I just think, they're the... in terms of those 4, they're the last place team. But, still a remarkable achievement for Unai Emery to take this team to the Champions League. And I'll also say this, Unai Emery, don't count him out to make a run. He made a run with Villarreal. He took them all the way to the semifinals. And if he's ever able to take Villarreal to the semifinals, I think he can, I think he has a good chance of taking Aston Villa on some sort of run too, especially when you look at the fact that they've gotten to the Champions League. That brings in more money for this Aston Villa ownership group that has proven to be aggressive and wanting to win. It'll prove that that money getting from going into the Champions League will really help them be able to make, get more signings and, change the trajectory of their club. But yeah, I'd rank it Liverpool, Arsenal, Aston Villa. But I'd say this, Aston Villa, obviously, I'd be shocked if they won the Champions League. I'd also go to that same level. I'd be shocked if Arsenal wins the Champions League, just based on their European pedigree of never winning a Champions League, and how they have, how have they been woeful in Europe ever since Mikel Arteta got in. They've been woeful in Europe. And I think Liverpool, now City is number one just based on the sheer talent that they have, obviously. But I think Liverpool is, number two. We're gonna take a short break here. When I come back, we will discuss Vinicius Jr. and his Ballon d'Or case.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free.
We continue to discuss the Champions League final. Vinicius Jr., there's been a lot of hype, especially amongst Real Madrid supporters, trying to push this Vinicius Jr. Ballon d'Or narrative, which is actually funny when you see that they could do that with multiple players like Toni Kroos or even a Jude Bellingham to a certain extent. But it seems like Vinicius Jr. is the one that they want to push for, and it's nice. That's calm, especially when you think about what he's gone through his career ever since he went to La Liga. Some of the racial abuse. It's nice to have a fan base supporting him, and I think this situation, though, amongst the Ballon d'Or gets very tricky with European competition, like European and Copa America international competition, and the Champions League, the club competition. I think no matter what happens this Champions League final, we will not have a clear Ballon d'Or winner till we figure out what happens in this summer. Because let's say Vinicius wins this, wins the Champions League, but he has another struggling tournament for Brazil where he doesn't take off, and they don't win Copa America, and you see Toni Kroos in his final games, walks off as a Champions League and European Championship winner, being the caliber of player he is. Well, that gives a strong chance for a guy like Toni Kroos to be rewarded that Ballon d'Or. So it's a very tricky situation, and it's a situation for me that cannot be finalized till we see what happens in these summer competitions. Now, if we want to break down Vinicius Jr., this season he's been remarkable. He's been sensational. He's been dominant. He takes over games like few players have the ability to take over. And, when you think about Vinicius Jr. now, you're strategizing to play against him. You're fearing playing against him. You're going into a matchup, and if you're getting ready to play Vinicius Jr., you're warning, your fullback, or if he's lined up, you're warning your defenders. That's the level that a guy like Vinicius Jr. has got to at this point in time, and he's a brilliant player. When you see the pace that he has, his end product now with the goals, assists, the way he can dominate games. I mean, what he did in that 25, 30 minutes stretch to start off that second half in that second leg against Bayern Munich, just completely dominated them. It just seemed like every time Real Madrid won back possession, they were saying immediately go to get the ball to Vinicius and let him attack, let him work. And he has been very, very important for Real Madrid this season. With the fact that they don't have a number 9, him and his ability to stretch a back line with his pace, him and Rodrigo, both, but especially Vinicius, been massively important in terms of goal scoring, in terms of creating space for other guys. Jude Bellingham, he had his 19, 20 goals that as number, but a lot of people don't take into the account that Vinicius and Rodrigo to a certain extent, but Vinicius especially, the way he's able to, draw the center backs or the fullbacks out of position, that allows Jude Bellingham to make those late runs into the box, to find opening between the center backs, to be in the right place at the right time. A lot of that comes from the fear factor of playing against a guy like Vinicius. I think Vinicius' impact goes more than just the goals and assists that you've seen. By the way, his goals and assists tally in the knockout stages of the Champions League, his ability for Real Madrid, it's been sensational. It's been sensational. And if if they win the Champions League tomorrow and he can replicate the form that he has for Real Madrid and take that to Brazil and show the level of play, his ability to dominate the games as Brazil, his end product following him at Brazil, getting goals, getting assists, being as dominant as he is for Real Madrid in knockout stage games, bringing that to Brazil at the Copa America, and he leads them, as he is undoubtedly right now at this point their best player. He leads them as a Copa America champion, bringing that title back for the first time since 2019. That would be a remarkable achievement, and I think it'll be very hard for you to make any sort of case for a guy like Toni Kroos or for a guy like Jude Bellingham. But that's just amongst his Real Madrid players. Now, amongst the world football, I think we're in a little bit of a not the strongest era, but mostly because Messi and Ronaldo, they just dominated it year in, year out. But obviously Mbappe, what he's done this season, 50 goals, 17 assists, winning League One, winning a domestic treble. He'll be in there if he wins Euro 2024 and he's their best player. He's gonna, it's gonna be hard to take it off him. Now, I don't see this happening, but let's say Phil Foden is able to lead England to a World Cup or to a European Championship, and he's starting playing game in, game out, and is their top performer with what he's done already this season for Manchester. Winning the Premier League with 28 goals, 12 assists. I think he has an opportunity there. Florian Wirtz, what he did with Bundesliga, winning the Bundesliga and DFB Pokal, going unbeaten in every single competition all season besides that one fatal Europa League final game. The way he dominated this season, scoring 19 goals and having 21 assists. If he can lead Germany to a European Championship, and he is the best player, and he is the star performer of the tournament, and he has that, breakout tournament. He had a breakout season at Bayer Leverkusen, but at Leverkusen you don't really have the eyes on you, as much, despite their success, but when you do it for your country at the European Championship, where everybody's going to be watching, all the international attention and media is going to be there, and he does that, not only will he skyrocket his transfer value, which these summer tournaments always happen to do, but he puts himself in that sort of running. Maybe it's just a year too soon. Sometimes it takes, sometimes you win it a year, you get these kind of the sort of attention a year later than a year before. But, I could see, I can see him a real chance. Now, somebody that I don't think will, be in the running, but someone I think will deserve, has deserved it. I know I'm going on saying a bunch of names, but it is a guy like Rodri. If he can win the Euros for Spain and replicate what he does for Manchester City, being their composer, being their dictator of play, their dictator of tempo, if he can replicate what he did for Manchester City for Spain at this summer, which he'll have an opportunity for, because this is the first international tournament for Spain that he's going to be able to play his role, because there's no Sergio Busquets no more, so they're not going to put him as a center back or anything like that. He gets the keys. He is the main conductor of the team. If he does that, you don't see these kind of players ever win the Ballon d'Or, because it's not really the sexy position. They don't get the goals. They don't hardly even get assists, even though Rodri has shown a capacity to get a goal once in a while. I think he deserves a lot of attention. I'd say attention, because he doesn't have the Champions League, and there'll be guys that potentially might have the Champions League that might have, equal to say to that. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think Vinicius Jr., if he can win this Champions League final and also do what he did for Brazil, what he does for Real Madrid, and take that to Brazil and replicate that sort of form, man, oh man, I think it's going to be hard to say, to deny Vinicius Jr. that Ballon d'Or. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we'll discuss if there's any way Gareth Southgate will remain as the England manager post Euro 2024.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Before the break, we discussed the Champions League final, whether or not that's enough for Vinicius to win the Ballon d'Or. It's now time to discuss Gareth Southgate. Now, there's a lot of speculation that's saying Gareth Southgate is coaching his final games for England this summer, and it's looking like it's because he's gonna want to leave this summer rather than any sort of firing that's gonna happen. And we want to discuss if there's any way Gareth Southgate will be England manager post Euro 2024. I think Gareth Southgate is coming from a position. Look, I've made my stance clear on him. I think he's I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a coach that makes a team better than the sum of their parts. I think the way that they I think there was major coaching flaws in what happened against Italy in the final. Some performances they had earlier in that tournament, especially the one against Scotland. You go back to the World Cup, I think there was some coaching deficiencies. I think he got out-coached in that semi-final against Croatia. But I think that this is not a manager that'll take you over the top. I think this is a manager that kind of keeps the team level. I don't think he's a bad manager there's managers that are out there that get their team underperforming. I don't think he's that, but I don't think he's a guy that can take this England national team over the top in trophies. Now, I'm making this argument now, but you can throw back this argument. Oh, there was a penalty shootout away from this or that. But again, you gotta realize they played every game that tournament besides the round of 16 against Ukraine, or the quarterfinal against Ukraine, at home in Wembley. For me, it's kind of unacceptable. Not only that they lost to Italy in that final, but how they could have lost to Denmark in that semifinal. how it took, they were down 1-0 and they were able to score the goal to tie, but it took a late penalty in that second half, or it would have went to extra time, a shaky penalty, by the way. It would have went extra time against a Denmark team that they were rolling the Euros, especially post that second game, which they ended up losing the first 2 games actually, but they still moved on to third place and all that, but they were going through the Eriksen situation. But going back to the main point though, despite the Denmark, and their success that they were able to have that tournament, England were the much better players, the much more talented players there. And it just seemed like it was so lackadaisical, England were penetrating, but there was no real sort of style of play. There was no sort of real, clear way that England had in that second half, in that extra time. There was no clear-cut way, a clear-cut plan for them to score a goal. It just seemed like a bunch of, it just seemed like, oh, let's just launch along, let's just do this, let's do that, let's do that. A little bit of a panic, and it didn't seem like, Denmark could really be in trouble of conceding it. It did lead to that penalty. That penalty did happen, a very questionable penalty. But going back to the main point, I'm saying, Gareth Southgate could have easily let them down in that game. And I think there's been moments. Now, you go back to that last World Cup, obviously, in that quarterfinals against France, there was no playing pragmatic. There was none of that. They just got done by France in a way that France did everyone. When you look at, I'll say this. A lot of people, there was a lot of people that, were eased off criticism of Gareth Southgate after that France game out of sympathy based on how England performed. But, I think the Moroccans could have been saying the exact same thing after that semi-final against France. Because if you look at it within the scope of the game, the Moroccans controlled possession of the ball. It seemed like the Moroccans were the ones that were more threatening throughout the 90 minutes. But France were doing what France did best in terms of getting the goal early, like they did against England, and sit back and observe pressure, because that's what France wanted to do. France were willing to observe the pressure, and as soon as England were able to get the equalizer, France needed a few minutes to gather themselves up, to ready to get going again, to stove off the pressure. And once that was 5 or so minutes was up, France were the ones that created all the chances all over again. France's were the next 5 minutes were the ones that were dictating play. And it took them 5 minutes to get, or it took them like 10 minutes to get that second goal and take the lead back. It just seemed like, for me, there was it was a lot of easing off Southgate based on, and I'm talking about the media, not based on everyone, but just based on the media. The fans, everyone, all the English fans that I know, they're very, very clear on their stance of Southgate. They don't think he's good enough. They think if you bring in a guy like, this is not going to happen, but if you bring in a guy like a Pep Guardiola or a Klopp or this or that, England will have a major international title by now. And I have to say, I have to agree with, I don't know if I'll agree with them, but I definitely think they have a much, much better chance than what they do, Southgate. And I think that has a lot to do with Southgate, potentially leaving afterwards. I think the fact that, he realizes, not majority, but a decent portion, a loud portion of the English fan base don't think Southgate is up for the job, or even though, he's had a great deal of confidence instilled by the English Football Federation and a lot of the pundits, they all happen to be in unison in terms of their praise for Southgate, but amongst the fans, it's been rather, very, very strange. It's been, a lot of Gareth Southgate's very negative towards him and his ability to lead England to the title. So I think that is the main reason why Gareth Southgate might want to leave. So now, will winning the Euros, I think that, I think then he has, if he wins the Euros, then it's really up to him. And then it really comes down to whether or not he wants to get back into club football, managing club football. You see the links with United and all that. Maybe he just thinks it's a new time for him, all that. But if he wins the Euros, I think definitely of him not wanting to leave is because of, the way the lack of embrace from the fans, in some cases negativity that comes from the fans. If that's the reason why he leaves, I think that, I think he stays after the Euros then, if he wins the Euros, because I think, that's gone. At the end of the day, you win a European Championship with England, any sort of negativity coming from the fans is going to disappear. The fans are going to celebrate, the fans are going to sing his name, the fans are going to apologize. That's just the nature of fandom. But if he wants to move on in something, in sort of that esque, and move on to be a club manager, take a job as the manager day in day out, taking training sessions day in day out, then I think winning the Euros and winning the Euros is a great way for him to do that, to step away from England, and I think that puts him as on a whether there's right or wrong, it gives him an opportunity to land a pretty good job. Now, let's look at it from the perspective, is there any way England fire him? Now, honestly, I have always said he's not good enough for the job, and I would have never gave it to him in the first place. But even now, there would have been a lot of times that I would have got rid of him. I would have got rid of him after every single major tournament for the last, like 3 or 4 that he's been manager. And, if I was looking at it, if I saw the way that England, and to keep in mind, England were not expected to go to the semifinal of the World Cup in 2018, but to go to the final of the European Championship in 2021. But if you want to look at that objectively, let's look at it from a completely objective point of view. You get past in the group stages. You win your first 2 games. You lose against Belgium in a game that you are both rested players. So let's forget about that. It takes you to penalties. It takes penalties, yet albeit a late equalizer that you actually got the first goal, by the way, by a penalty. It took you to penalties to get past a Colombian team playing without their best player in James Rodriguez, and then I wouldn't say luck, but you get fortunate to take on a rather weaker team compared to other potential quarterfinal teams in Sweden in the quarterfinal, and then you get to the semifinals in Croatia and you lose to the first real team that you go up against. And in my opinion too, that Croatia team has grit, all that, in tournament they have pedigree, all that. You can't deny that. But when you look at it strictly based on players, the England players, how many Croatian players would have gone into that England team? Maybe like 3? But Zlatko Dalic outcoached Gareth Southgate in that game. And I would have fired him after that. I would have fired him after the European Championship in 2021, where, again, very easy run to the final, in my opinion, playing every game at home besides the quarterfinals, getting to play a weaker Ukraine and Denmark team in the quarter and semifinals rather than, some of the, real teams that you could have faced in the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then getting played against England, Italy, and really suffering for a lot in that game. And then the World Cup, he's accomplished what he accomplished. By the way, they had some bad moments in the World Cup too in the 2022. When you look at the way that they performed against the U.S., really got outplayed by the U.S. But and then losing to France, being a protagonist, aggressive team in that France game, but really it was because France allowed that to happen and they were willing to observe the pressure. So, yeah, it is what it is. We're going to take a short break here. When we come back, I'm going to react to some of the top headlines going around in the football world. on to the final topic of the day. We react to some of the top headlines going on in the world of football. Al Hilal defeated Al Nassr to win the Saudi Cup, and they landed the double. You can see after the penalty shootout, you see an emotional Cristiano Ronaldo, fighting his tears, actually crying, while walking off the pitch, being consulted by some of the Al Hilal players. And, really it was kind of a surprising thing to me, because I don't know, obviously you can't, being in Saudi and all that, it just shows the competitiveness in Cristiano Ronaldo. And yes, he's playing a game, he's getting paid money, he's playing a game, he's playing for a team, he's employed, all that. But, it's still human nature to understand the significance of a Saudi League Cup final, compared to like a Champions League final or Euro semifinal or something like that. It's not, I don't think it's crazy to say that, like, the level of emotional, the level of emotion between the two is probably different. It is. It's probably different, but it's really a sentiment to Cristiano Ronaldo's competitiveness, Cristiano Ronaldo's commitment to the team, commitment to the league, respect of the team, respect to the league. And it's hats off to him. He's a brilliant competitor, one of the best players to ever do it. And we're gonna get to see him on the biggest stage this summer in the European Championship. And for me, I see a big tournament coming up for him, honestly, with what he did at Saudi. I'm very, very impressed by Cristiano Ronaldo, and it was very interesting to see how he reacted to the Saudi Cup final. But hats off to him, and hopefully he returns next year to Saudi and has a little bit more success in terms of trophy with this team. Now, there's been a decent amount of headlines. Obviously, the Champions League final going on. You got the women's soccer teams, Olympic soccer teams. There's going to be Olympic Games for women's soccer, and a women's soccer Olympic Games is kind of a condensed version of a women's World Cup when you look at the fact that there is no age restrictions for the women's game. And there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a big tournament for the U.S. women's national team, who's being coached by Emma Hayes, the star of coaching in terms of women's football, probably the best coach in women's football. She's going to try to come in and, revolutionize this U.S. women's national team. This women's national team that's kind of, been on a downturn ever since lately, the last Olympic Games, doing really poorly, getting eliminated in the round of 16 at the World Cup, potentially being eliminated in the group stages, being a post away. This U.S. women's national team is just not at that level anymore, and it's kind of the world catching up, and the world being able to develop these women with very technical and gifted ability, and the women worldwide being able to catch up with the athleticism. I think U.S. women's soccer team being much better than everyone else just is a lot to do more with the opportunities for the women game in America than just based on sheer soccer talent. I think the soccer talent around the world is just in generally better, but the opportunities and the economic opportunities for women in Brazil or women in Argentina, women in certain European countries, the opportunities for the women's game is not there. But I think the rise of women's game as a whole in the world is really helping women around the world, but it's it's making the U.S. weaker, because they're not having that advantage over other teams. But strictly looking at this team, I think Emma Hayes comes in and she will bring leadership, she's gonna bring leadership. She's, a tactician. She's gonna get this U.S. team playing her style of play. What she did at Chelsea was remarkable. The consistency, I think, is gonna be very important for the U.S. I think the women's team has been lacking good, solid coaching in terms of tactics, in terms of coaches with consistency, in terms of touchline behavior, in terms of, their attitude, in terms of just the persona that they have as being a world-class manager. I think the U.S. women's national team over the last few times haven't really had that kind. I think this is the best coach the U.S. women's national team has had, maybe in their history. And I think it's a very important move for them, and I think it can, this will get the U.S. women's soccer team back, in my opinion, to the top of the top, to competing in these finals. Now, whether they're not winning them, I don't know, because there is the rise of England, there's the rise of Spain, who have a brilliant national team, despite a lot of what's going on amongst the federation and all that. In terms of the women's national team, they have a brilliant women's national team. Sweden is always strong. So I think the U.S. women's national team will definitely be up against it. But I think bringing in a guy like Emma, or bringing in a coach like Emma, bringing in a coach like Emma Hayes will. There's no coaching. Coaching hire the USWNT could make to elevate them higher than what they made with hiring Emma Hayes. And I think it is a little bit worry of the quick turnaround to the Olympics, but I definitely think this gives the U.S. women's national team a good chance to medal at the Olympics and to do really, really well at the following World Cup, which is always, that's always, a great objective for them. There was West Ham. They're currently in talks with Palmeiras over Guilherme. You see these European, these Brazilian talents. They're really starting to ratchet up again. You look at Andre Santos getting signed from Chelsea, Enrique going to Real Madrid. These Brazilian talents, they're really ramping up. They're coming quite often now, and it's a good sign, because there was a little bit of a stagnant window when it comes to young talent coming out of Brazil, and you kind of show with the national team over the past few years. But I think there's a lot of young talent coming from Brazil, and it's gonna make a brilliant display. Monaco midfielder Mohamed Kamara, he's been given a 4-game suspension by the French league after he covered up an anti-homophobia message on the team's shirt during their final League One game of the season. So he has been suspended 4 matches for that. We remember there was some controversy a few years ago, not a few years ago, but a couple seasons ago, over Idrissa Gueye refusing to play in a game because of the rainbow numbers promoting LGBTQ and Monaco player, he has been suspended for 4 games. Roma, they have signed Angelino from Leipzig on a permanent deal after the loan with Roma for the season. He's signed on a permanent deal. Lucas Paquetá, he is set to stay in the Brazil squad ahead of the Copa America, as he's, as him and his team are appealing the charges within the England FA, the betting charges. He's going to stay in the squad, but it's looking like a punishment, and potentially a heavy punishment might be coming down for Lucas Paquetá, which is very unfortunate. And that's probably a reason why he's not a Manchester City player right now, is because of that betting scandal. And it's really a shame for him, because that kind of move could really have elevated him to the next level. So hopefully he gets that sorted out, and he doesn't have to miss time, as obviously if he's not guilty of what they're accusing him. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast presented by the GSMC Sport Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you once again and have a wonderful day.